Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 4097. Today's date is June 12, 2000. Yeah, June 12, 2026. It's been almost like a morning at exactly 8:02 a.m. Yeah. It's kind of like a feel little bit of hot. The weather is kind of like a really hot. It's a June 12, and the weather forecast is kind of like a saying that monsoon will gonna come at June 17. I am kind of like eagerly waiting for the monsoon. When will it gonna arrive? I am kind of like a, this is kind of like a very hot, like usually what is actually happen as soon as I wake up. I usually wake up at 6:30 a.m. and when I wake up at 6:30 a.m. I kind of like a wake up by kind of like a lot of sweat in it. It's not because of that ki the fan and cooler is not working. Is because of that ki like a usually in my living room they have a kind of like a cooler and fan. Okay. But when I wake up at the morning, obviously I wrap up everything and kind of like a went downstairs to kind of like a number two. And like basically soon as I leave my living room, it kind of like a feel hotter. Like a entire home is kind of like a bitterly hotter beside living room, because living room they have a cooler and things and that and that. So during the night, it is also kind of like a bit more hotter. Just even the morning is a kind of like a bit more hotter. Like I was kind of like a thinking that the morning would be kind of like a much more pleasant and things are kind of like a really good, but the morning is also really hot. Yeah, like literally I was kind of like expecting that okay, during the day it is hot, all right, during the night it is kind of like a become really hot, all right, but morning, like morning should supposed to be kind of like a somebody that key like a cool at least. Like usually I wake up and kind of like I checked my weather that why am I kind of like a feel that much warm, and I welcome that key the weather is 37 degrees Celsius in the morning at 6:30 a.m. 37. Oh my god. By the way, that 37 degrees Celsius is a kind of like an average, by the way. Okay, average or kind of like a things or that. I don't know, but it's very hot. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of like that's why I'm kind of like eagerly waiting for the monsoon when will gonna arrive. Yeah, they probably say that 17th of June, like a monsoon is still like monsoon is actually arrive at the Tamil Nadu and Kerala, the South India. But I live in Maharashtra, which is kind of like a central part of India. Will gonna arrive at probably June 17 or 20 probably. Yeah. And also is this thing that ki monsoon will kind of like a not gonna stay longer. It's just kind of like a, the monsoon will kind of like a somebody just couple of, it's not really that much. The rain will kind of like a fall very less. Precipitation will gonna happen very less this year. Weather forecaster kind of like a predict all those things because of super El Nino and things like that and that. So whatever. uh Global is kind of like a warming, very hot these days. All right, should we jump to the question? All right, let's go. All right, so question is, if my future self looked at today action, would they proud? Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? A couple of days ago I read a book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I wanted to implement the value that book taught me. Like I decided, like basically is this thing na ki why I kind of like a something just read the book and just like why I'm kind of like a focus on implementation. Like reading a book is doesn't really make sense at all. Like basically right now I'm reading this book. Okay, yeah. if I read these 700 pages of book and I never really implemented the value in my life, then what is actually meaning of this book? Nothing really at all, na? The value of the book is a kind of like a something determined by how much you put inside in your head. Yeah, how much you put inside in your head, how much you put inside in your lifestyle and things and that and that. Books are kind of like a something that a guidance to kind of like a give you a better self. And if you just reading a book are just not meant to be the read. Book are meant to be kind of like a read and implement the value. And yeah, so basically I am not really focused on read so many book. I'm kind of like a focus on whatever the book that I will gonna read, I wanted to implement the values. So yeah. So a couple of days ago, I read a book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and I wanted to implement the value. So I went to ChatGPT, said that I read this book, I wanted to implement the value, suggest me 20 question. ChatGPT kind of like a suggest me 20 question. I have to be asked this question to myself and giving the honest answer. Alright. So the question is that key. By the way, the question actually in the mobile phone, but while recording, I cannot do anything at all. So that's why I wrote question in here. Okay, and this is the question. By the way, this is kind of like a lot of rough work. Okay, this is kind of like a lot of kind of like I kind of like do a lot of kind of like things. Like this is a kind of like one of the kind of like something such a book that like it's very not understandable book. Okay, like literally this book is like yeah. So I kind of like figure it out a way to kind of like read the book. Okay, so instead of reading a book, obviously I cannot able to understand. So I click the photo, put it on the ChatGPT, kind of like tell you that he explain me kind of like this text in a simple language. ChatGPT kind of like explain me in simple language, and when I understand, I write down over here, because even if I kind of like understand, it's not really that key. I just have to I have to be kind of like a write down. So this is kind of like somebody just rough and things at the same time. So yeah, I kind of like a really put is the relative motion, then absolute motion, then true motion. These are kind of like a definition, are kind of like a somebody determined by the Isaac Newton, what he was kind of like thinking about that relative motion and things and that, which is really cool by the way. Okay, if I'm kind of like tell you, okay, so from Newton point of perspective, what is actually the relative motion? Okay, so you are in the train where train is actually moving 100 km per hour. Okay, so from your point of perspective, you are not moving, the seat is not moving, the chair and everything is not actually moving. But from ground point of perspective, you are moving at 100 km per hour. So that's a kind of like a relative means like that perspective, like from your point of perspective you are just standing still. But if you are kind of like looking at me from kind of like something that out of the train and things and that, and then you are kind of like a thing that I'm kind of like moving from one place to another place at 100 km per hour. So this is kind of like a relative motion. Okay, now absolute motion, what's the absolute motion or true motion? What is actually the kind of like a Newton says? Okay, so the true motion or absolute motion is a kind of like such a motion where kind of like a motion that actually happen in some certain space, but that space is not moving. Okay, yeah, basically you are at the home is not moving. Okay, but earth is kind of like a revolve around the sun is revolve around the galaxy revolve around what? Okay, so galaxy does not really revolve around anything at all. Okay, like probably galaxy revolve around the kind of like a Sagittarius A, but at that time Newton doesn't really know that the black hole, the Sagittarius A, was kind of like exist. Okay, even kind of like a galaxy, Newton doesn't really knew that thing. Okay, yeah, he just kind of like a thing that he probably, I don't know, something that he was kind of like a thinking that solar system, probably he was not kind of like a thinking about the galaxy. Okay, so his point of perspective, he was kind of like a say this thing that like earth is kind of like a rotate around the sun, or maybe galaxy kind of like a rotate around the Sagittarius A, and then after that just nothing. Okay, yeah, it just the motion is not actually happened. Like basically it's this thing that the motion is kind of like a relative to something. Like I am moving, so I am kind of like moving is because of that respect to the ground. Like I am kind of like moving, so from my point of perspective I'm kind of like something, like if I'm kind of like a train, I'm moving, like if I'm kind of in the train, I'm kind of like sitting, so from my point of perspective it just kind of like I'm not moving. From ground point of perspective, a person who is in the ground, that point of perspective, he was kind of like a see that ki I am moving. So basically is this thing that ki the motion is actually happened from perspective or kind of like a relative to each other and things and that. Okay, yeah, me to ground or me to person who is on the ground or things and that. Okay, yeah, but in the universe, in the space, we don't really have a relative, like a basically earth is kind of like a rotate around the sun, so basically the earth and sun is kind of like a rotate, so it's a relative. Okay, the sun is kind of like a rotate around the galaxy, so the sun is kind of like a galaxy rotate around the galaxy, so there is a relative. Then galaxy is actually rotate around what? So there is no kind of like a something that key relation between the galaxy towards something else. So if there is no kind of like a relation at all, so that is called kind of like a something, that motion is kind of like a something absolute motion, or kind of like a something is this thing that ki true motion, the kind of like a Isaac Newton kind of like describe. So this is kind of like a stuff. Okay, yeah, so this kind of like I wrote over here. I'm not saying that ki, like is like I know it's a kind of like completely wrong because of that ki, like basically earth is kind of like a rotate around the sun is actually rotated around the galaxy rotated around the kind of like a something the Sagittarius A is a kind of like a something, it's not rotated around but it's kind of like expanding towards the local group, and local group is a kind of like a somebody universe cosmic background and things and that. So everything is actually moving and things and that there is no kind of like a somebody stagnant, there is no still, there is nothing really at all. Everything is kind of like a moving, the entire galaxy is a kind of like a moving in things and that. So basically from Einstein point of perspective everything is kind of like a moving, but Newton point of perspective it says that ki after the galaxy we don't really have any kind of like a relative to something, so probably there is no motion at all. So probably like a from Newton point of says that ki after the galaxy there is nothing really at all, so there is no motion at all. So that's, they mention that true motion, which is kind of like a somewhat something that I understand that ki why does kind of like a Newton says, because obviously this is in the way that he born, the where he born, and at that time thinking about that stuff, like, and on that period of time it was too much, like too much. Okay, yeah, so it's really good by the way. Yeah, all right. I love this book. I never really thought that I would kind of like somebody consume this book, but yeah, it's really good. But still, there is a long way to go home. It's 700 pages of book. It's not really that key. Yeah. All right, whatever. The question is that I was completely kind of level lost. The question is that if my future kind of like a self looked at today's action, would they proud? It's a kind of like a thing that na ki, imagine that ki you are kind of like a doing your work, and kind of like a, your future self is a kind of like a somebody just like, let's just say I am kind of like a recording artifact and my future self is kind of like a somebody here. I will not gonna see my future self, but that future self is kind of like a looked at to me towards me. So if my future self is kind of like a looking towards me, then will he be proud because of my work and things and that? Well, like you have to understand that thing. Okay, yeah, ki, like it's a kind of like a thing that na ki it's a, I'm not really sure. Okay, yeah, that ki what is actually my future, if my future is kind of like stay here, and will he proud about my action and things and that. I would gonna say, yeah, dude, yes, I'm kind of like doing my work, I'm kind of like making my life as much as better and things and that. But probably it's a thing, it's a very kind of like a very like a future is a kind of like a very unpredictable. You do not know that ki what is actually kind of like a will become. Okay, yeah. My belief is that ki, like I would not gonna kind of like do my work to kind of like a get a sense of proud from my future self. I don't want that. Like if there is a kind of like a future self in front of me and he was kind of like a saying that I'm really proud of you, I don't really care at all. Why? Because I'm not kind of like doing for my future. No, I am kind of like doing for kind of like things that I wanted to, things that I wanted to add value to the people and things and that. I'm not kind of like doing for my better future. Like okay, what's exactly better future? What is exactly what you think about the better future? Oh, yeah, you want big house, big car, big thing. Like it it doesn't really add any kind of like a value. I'm not saying that ki kind of like a stay poor all the time, but it's a kind of like a thing that na ki when you are earning money kind of like a some certain way, then earning more money does not really add any kind of like a value. Nothing really at all. Like basically, if you are a millionaire, you are kind of like a somebody getting everything. Kind of like a big house, car, people are kind of like a working for you. Everything is like kind of like a really good. Now you are earning billions of money. What kind of like a value it add after you earn billions of money? Nothing really at all. Okay, so basically, is this thing money is a kind of like a somebody just a I don't know. I never really kind of like consider myself that I would kind of like earn so much amount of money and things. I don't know. I wanted to add value in people's life. That's the thing that I wanted to do. I am kind of like a feel really good that ki about like a with my action I add kind of like a value in people life, and that particular person feel really good. Kind of like I make his life kind of like a much more better. I am feel really proud of myself. I will not gonna kind of like a feel that ki kind of like a future self is kind of like a looking at me and kind of like a somebody he was proud and I feel really good, and I don't know, I'm not kind of like a doing something for my future. Yeah, because like what I would kind of like a do something for my future. What I want, big house, I have house. Big car, oh, like I want car. It's not really that I don't really want car, but a kind of like a somebody a kind of like a simple SUV would be kind of like a much more better. Okay, yeah. What would you kind of like a buy a Rolls Royce? Like if you buy Rolls Royce, you cannot able to drive the Rolls Royce. Why? Because of that ki you are living in India. Imagine that ki you are kind of like a went to the kind of like a drive the Rolls Royce and you are stuck in the traffic. Does it really make sense at all? Like you are kind of like a driver, you are kind of like a stuck at traffic at the Rolls Royce, and there is a kind of like a side is a Maruti Suzuki Alto. Imagine scenario, this is the your car, okay, Rolls Royce, and this is the Maruti Suzuki Alto. Like he was kind of like saying, who the fuck is this? Like I am also stuck in traffic, the Rolls Royce guy is also stuck in the traffic, so it doesn't really make sense at all. So yeah, so what I'm saying is that na ki yeah, I am gonna make my life little bit of convenience from like I don't know, dude. I never really think about that, like a money and kind of like a making my life as much kind of like a better, convenient and things. I never really consider myself as a kind of like a settled and things and that. And I always wanted to kind of like a do the work. It's not really that I just kind of like a some just I don't know. Okay. The only one thing that I would gonna do to kind of like a something add value in people life, like artifact. Artifact is a kind of like add so much amount of value in people life. Gurukul is kind of like add kind of like educational value in people life. Adam is a kind of like add value in people convenience in kind of like understanding the future consequences and try to give the better approach regarding about taking actions and things and that. Cleaning the garbages, these are kind of like a things that I would gonna do to kind of like add value in people life. Yeah, that is the only thing that I wanted to do. It's not really that I would kind of like a proud of myself. There is a one thing that I am kind of like a thinking that ki this would be kind of like a much more problematic. What is actually that ki I if I kind of like a went to the run, okay, I'm kind of like a focusing on kind of like I usually kind of like a run every single day. From last 5 years I'm kind of like a simply running 30-minute non-stop, and because of this thing I am kind of like a become really healthy. So if I'm running and if my future self is actually watching myself, then obviously my future self would be kind of like a really proud because of that key. Basically if I run, then I would kind of like a become more healthy in the future. Oh yeah, so in that context I might gonna say yeah, the future self would gonna kind of like a bit more kind of like a proud of myself that I would kind of like a doing workout and things and that. Okay, yeah. Okay, like why this question is a kind of like a much more kind of like the essential and things and that. Now imagine like a someone who kind of like a somebody that key like a waste his time a lot. Like a basically it's this thing. Let me tell you one thing. Okay, I am 32. Okay, and if I kind of like went back maybe 10 years ago. Okay, 10 year ago, at that time my age was kind of like a 22. Okay, yeah, almost like a 20, like a 2016. Yeah, 2016, 2016. Okay, so at that time, okay, if I went back in time 10 year ago, would I be proud of myself to whatever the action that I was kind of like doing in 2016? Well, probably what I'm thinking that na ki I would not gonna proud of myself, but also I would not kind of like give any kind of like a warning, or I would not kind of like somebody give any kind of like a somebody that key like a do not waste your time, kind of like focus on your work and things and that. I will not gonna do anything at all. Why? Like basically my kind of like a past self, like if I went back 10 year ago, at that time I was kind of like somebody spending time lot of time with my friends and kind of like somebody just doing stupid shit and things and that. Okay, yeah. So at that time, will I be able to be proud? Like I will not gonna proud, I will not gonna be kind of like a things, I will kind of like feel like nostalgic. Yeah, probably. Why is that, and why are you not kind of like somebody giving you kind of like a better advice to your past self? Well, probably is this thing that na ki the one thing I realize about the life, okay, that ki your life is kind of like a never been good, never been right, never been kind of like a better. Your experience, your situation, your surrounding is kind of like a, okay, let me tell you something. Okay, yeah. If I kind of like went back in 2016, okay, yeah, and I tell my past self that ki, dude, like do not like in 2016 na, I kind of like went to do a job. I went to Nagpur and kind of like started doing a job, and it was kind of like a really disaster because of that I kind of like lost 4 years of my life. Okay, so I knew that ki if I kind of like went there from 2016 to 2020, I might gonna lost 4 years of my life. So I would kind of like tell my past self that ki, dude, do not do this thing. Kind of like a somebody that ki just kind of like a somebody just started YouTube. Okay, like a start YouTube, kind of like a somebody create a video on YouTube platform regarding about the Photoshop or photography and things and that. Okay, if I kind of like give this advice to my past self in 2016, okay, uh, then what would gonna happen? Well, basically there is another timeline will gonna open about myself. Okay, at that key I will kind of like started doing YouTube, and kind of like obviously at the beginning I might not gonna do well, but similarly throughout the time I will kind of like improve and things and that. Okay, but probably I might not gonna say this thing very confidently. Why? Because of that key in 2016 I never really knew about anything about the YouTube. I knew about the YouTube. I just know that YouTube is a kind of like a place where you could kind of like watch some sort of video. At that time, I never really knew that YouTube is a kind of like a place where you could earn money or subscribe or like. It doesn't really make sense at all at that time. I was kind of like a YouTube is just kind of like a watching videos and things and that. Oh yeah. And basically my future self is kind of like telling me that in 2016 that you might gonna earn money from the YouTube. I was kind of like blown out by this fact that you can able to be earn money from the YouTube. Okay, yeah, because I never really believed that YouTube is a kind of like a money that you were supposed to be earn in 2016. Okay, and another thing is that na ki the like even if like basically my future self or in the kind of like somebody, if I kind of like went back in time and kind of like telling that do the YouTube and things and that higher chances that particular person will not gonna believe in me if I'm kind of like telling that I'm the future. Why is that? Because it's just like that na ki at that time I wanted to become a filmmaker. I never really kind of like think about that ki YouTube and things and that I wanted to be YouTube, I wanted to be filmmaker like in 2016. So I never really kind of like take this kind of like somebody approach to kind of like be a YouTuber. I was kind of like thinking that, dude, are you fucking? I wanted to become a filmmaker. What do I supposed to do with the YouTuber and things and that. Okay, yeah. So basically, is this thing that the possibility of kind of like a started YouTube, even if I'm kind of like a future self, kind of like give the advice that do the YouTube, I would not gonna do that thing. Yeah, like basically there is a kind of like a lot of thing will gonna happen. It's not really that I would kind of like go back in time, give the advice, and my past self will kind of like simply follow that advice. No, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah, because I do know myself that at that time I was kind of like a wanted to become a filmmaker, and I was kind of like very much confident. Previously, almost like in 2015 or 2014, I kind of like went to the Bombay multiple times to kind of like try to figure it out how do I supposed to stay in Bombay and things and that and that. So at that time I was kind of like a very eager to kind of like go into the Bombay. Yeah. So what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key, like like even if I went back in time, it's not really that ki my past self will kind of like take the advice from me. Nothing really at all. Okay. And also is this thing that na ki I also don't want to kind of give any kind of advice. Why is because of that na. Okay, there is a one thing that I'm gonna mention. Okay, yeah. That key I kind of said that key do not do a job. Okay, yeah. Basically I went back in 2016 and I kind of tell myself that key do not do a job. Okay, yeah. Start the YouTube, or even if you don't want to do a YouTube, just kind of do not do a job. Okay, yeah. But if I not do a job, then there is a lot of kind of things. Okay, let me tell you one thing. I mentioned that key I lost my 4 year of my life of doing a job. Okay, but that is a wrong. I know I waste time, but it's not like waste of time. I understand the people, I understand the kind of how the work works. I understand I could able to be kind of sit in front of the computer for at least a 10-hour non-stop. This is all kind of a habit I cultivated through the office culture. I understand the politics. I understand the kind of a lot of things. When you are kind of do a job, you understand a lot of people. You understand a lot of things. You understand people. You understand the culture. You understand the kind of experience, and that experience is only kind of get when you experience that thing. It's a knowledge of experience when you get from the experience. Nah, you cannot get this kind of a knowledge from someone told you and you kind of get. It's not. Even if I'm say that thing, I kind of lost 4 years of my life for doing a job, but it's not because of this kind of because of I could able to be kind of sit in front of my desk and kind of do my work for at least a 10 hour because of this habit I cultivated from the office. This kind of a habit, it kind of really helped me to kind of stay in front of my computer and kind of do my work. It kind of really resonate me to kind of do my things. Previously I was not able to kind of sit in front of my desk and for that long, but I could able to do this thing because of the kind of a habit that I cultivated in the office culture. So yeah, this is what it is. It's not really that you are kind of getting basically usually people are kind of consider as a kind of a thing that na ki you get there, you have to get succeed. If you not, then probably do not. But that is not basically 4 years of my life I consider that is a failure, but I kind of learn a lot, so many stuff regarding about so many things, and these are kind of really help me to kind of build myself life in the future and things like that and that. So I would not kind of simply jeopardize the opportunity of my past self to kind of understand from that thing. If my past self are kind of doing some from mistake, I let him do that thing. Let him do that thing. Let him kind of things, because this is what I learned from my mistake, and I also want that my past self should supposed to be learn from his mistake too. Because basically it's this thing na ki one of the biggest kind of a teacher is your mistake. If you don't know the mistake, how should you supposed to be learn? Yeah, basically it's this thing, the teacher or kind of your future self will not gonna kind of teach you the kind of right and wrong. Your mistake will kind of teach you what is really right and wrong. And I don't want to kind of simply let that go, that opportunity from kind of simply the future self and things. No, I wanted to kind of simply let them kind of my past self will kind of experience the mistake. Let them make a mistake. Let him make a mistake and things like that. And that is kind of a right thing. Also regarding about the question says that he will my future kind of see proud if I'm kind of doing my work. I don't know, and I don't want it to be kind of make my future proud of my doing action today. Nothing really at all. I wanted to do a work. I wanted to add value in people's life, and yeah, it's not really that I don't want to earn money. I wanted to earn money, but a kind of a significant amount of money that I could able to be earned, so that I would supposed to survive and kind of follow my dreams and passions and things and that and that. I'm not kind of thinking that I would have a kind of a Rolls Royals, and I would have a kind of somebody that private jet, and I would have a kind of somebody just, yeah, that make me more lazy, right? So yeah, so this is my answer. All right, so this is it.